O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with the each who feels himself know he is also one with every other. Please take your seat and silence for a moment.
Thank you. We are very happy that Brother Tim Boyd, our international president, is with us today. And Madam Lily Boyd is also here. They had come here 10 years back. And so this is the next visit after such a long time. And we are very grateful to Sister Dupaji for making it possible to bring them to Odisha and also to be able to bring it to our federation. As you see that this is a work in progress. We had at that time nearly 200 odd members. Today we have 650 members. So we need additional place. So we are building a hall there. So you would have seen all the material here. So sorry for the inconvenience. But I hope that the hall will come up and then we'll have more space. Brother Timboy doesn't need any introduction. We are actually having a hybrid meeting, not only physically, all of you are present here. So I welcome all of you and also people who are joined online. Brother Pradeep Mahapatra is actually uh, organizing this. So he says that not only people from different parts of Odisha and India have signed in, but also from other parts of the world. So I think this is a truly international meeting that we are having today. So thank him for that. He's also secretary program for the Indian section. He has been having this program very often on the net. So he's very experienced, apart from being a national lecturer and vice president of the federation. So Brother Boyd doesn't need an introduction, but those of you either online or here do not have more details about him. So these are a few things I just would like to mention. Firstly, he has been a very successful president for the last 10 years. From 2014, he was elected as president and again in 2021. And he has very able support from Madam Lily Boyd in his work as an international president. And before that, he was president of the American section for 2 terms. Part of it was coinciding with this. And before that, he was also the president of the Theosophical Order of Service in America. And he has done a lot of work. One of the important work was he went to Tibet, to an orphanage. He met Dalai Lama there. And subsequently, I think it was in 2011 that at his invitation, Dalai Lama came and they had a program over 2 days where 10,000 people attended. So that shows about his organizing capability and about his education. He studied in Brown University and Chicago University for a university degree in public affairs. So I would not say more about his background. I think you can all find on the net more details. But I wanted to, with his permission, tell you two things. One is that he is very witty and humorous. And I wanted to give an example, if you don't mind. So, theosophists are very serious. I think all of you are very serious space. So we had a school of wisdom. in Adyar, and that there the people who attend they are even more serious looking. And Sister Kim Dew was directing that course. She was also looking very serious. I was also there, equally serious probably. So he walks in and then he says, "I'm Tim Boy," and people compare me to Barack Obama, that you are like him. So then he says, Barack Obama was born later, he's younger to me. So he actually looks like me, not me like him. And the other thing he said, that he is only president of the United States, but I am the president for the entire 70 countries we have members. So I think his talk would be very witty and humorous. And the other thing, I think in 2011, we had invited him to give a public lecture at the International Convention. That's the first time I actually met him. And that talk is about 1 hour. So he gave a talk for 1 hour and he didn't have a scrap of paper with him. So that was very impressive that somebody could talk on philosophy, serious subject without any scrap of paper. So he's a great orator. So I'm sure that you will all enjoy his talk. So we are planning that there will be a talk on the topic he has chosen is trust and the spiritual life. And then it will be followed by a question answer. The questions could be on this topic, but I suppose on any other theoretical topic or anything else. We have many young members, new members. So I was just talking to them before you came, so I'm sure some of them will have some questions, both the new and old members. And since quite a few of our members would be following only in Odia, so I have requested Brother Asutosh, who also reads news for the Doordarshan and All India Radio, but he is a very seasoned member of the Theosophical Society. So if he could talk to the Odia speaking people, the gist of your talk at the end of it. And before that, I would request that since you are here, we'll take the advantage of distributing some of the diplomas which have just come, if it is okay with you. Can I just call out the names? Sitanshu Shekhar Patnaik. Is he here? Please come quickly. So this has the signature of his. We had many new members recently. Anusuya Panda, is he here? Yes. Is he? Kande, asonto sigira. Anusuya Panda. Okay. Seniruddha Das. I think they are not one. Pramod Kumar Raut. Please come. Jai Sri Kumari Devi. Vijay Kumar Samal. Bharati Brahma. Parthasarathi Das. Parthasarathi Das. What is your name? Oh, your name. Anasuya Panda. Sanghamitra Mahapatra. Madhumita Das. Madhumita Das. Sanjukta Chand. I think they Saroj Kumar Chaudhary. That will send out. I would like to now invite the other team to speak on the topic.
All right, I'd like to say thank you first to Chitta Satapathy. He and I worked together for some years at Adyar. He was the first vice president that I had during my time in office. So we had a chance to work together quite a bit. It's very good to be here with you again. I was here 10 years ago. And so it's always good to get back and to see some of the developments that are taking place. Not least among them is that your membership is now expanded to 650 members, which is quite impressive. You obviously are doing something right here. So that's very good. I want to talk a little bit tonight about a subject that is, it's something that's meaningful for our normal lives. And it's also meaningful when we start to approach something like a spiritual life. Subject is trust. Trust. And I think it's something that we all have had to think about. It's something that we all have experience with. When we think in terms of trust, it's the fabric of any successful relationship. It's a requirement. Whether that's business, whether that's political, whether that's personal, husband, wife, children, trust is required. And where you have it, you have success, and you're able to weather storms that others may not be able to. The idea that we can have confidence in the character, the nature, the strength, the honesty of the people that we deal with is something that is a requirement for us. Of course, it's also the normal experience that anyone who has lived long enough is too much aware of the experience of having that trust broken, violated. There, around the world, there are people, there are nations, there are governments that have not only not earned our trust, but have somehow managed to violate that trust. And it's something that causes really severe repercussions. I mean, when you think about it, the number of people who have been wounded by their trust being broken. It's the subject of movies around the world. You know, Bollywood as well as Hollywood do movies on the hearts that have been broken by the people who have been false in people's lives. Too often, you have children who at a very young age are scarred, sometimes for life, because of selfish parents. Parents whose focus is they say one thing, they do another. They provide an example of the opposite of what it is that they tell to their children. It's the normal experience. And it's something that many people in the United States, there's a booming therapy business that is there specifically to address the childhood traumas that people have experienced related to bad parenting, selfish parenting. And unfortunately, we all know too well about those places we look to as being sacred, the temples, the churches of the world, where people come to entrust the health and the care of their very souls, only to find that trust broken. I have talked with people, I've met people in various places around the world who have an attitude that they don't feel they can even trust God. Why? Because the place you go to that's supposed to be holy in his name is not trustworthy. Often people have experiences in their lives where they have certain expectations. Why is it? How is it that someone dear to me has been taken away, has died so early in life? If there's supposed to be justice, if there's supposed to be a divinity, how could he allow this wonderful person to be snatched away in the prime of life? It's a common experience, and it's one that affects people. It affects an essential trust in the universe. So this is the normal pattern that we all live, in our normal day-to-day lives. These are the areas that we have to navigate. When we start to find that there is something we might point to as an inclination toward the spiritual life, then certain changes take place in our point of view. Now, what does it mean to trust from the perspective of trust in the soul, trust in the universe, trust in the justice of the various laws of nature, karma, reincarnation, all of the different things? What does that trust entail? Now, in many ways, we're very fortunate in our theosophical literature. You have something like that very small book, At the Feet of the Master. Krishnamurti, when he was 13 years old, these verses were told to him and he wrote them down. But in that book, there are a couple of lines that relate to this subject very strongly. In fact, At the Feet of the Master, all of the various points that are listed in there, discrimination, desirelessness, good conduct, love, all of those points are really a contemporary statement of ageless wisdom. I mean, you look to the Viveka Chudamani of Shankara. The exact same points are elaborated. And At the Feet of the Master, the word for trust is spoken of as confidence. Viveka Chudamani, they talk about Shraddha. Shraddha in the Shatsampati, the 6 points of conduct. So under this section, this little section in that small book about good conduct, the point is made about the importance in the spiritual life of trust. And the way it's stated is like this. There's a passage, and what it says is, unless trust, and I'll get this in a minute, probably you remember, unless there is trust, unless there is perfect trust, there cannot be the perfect flow of love and power. So in the absence of a trust that's not just normal, but a trust that is somehow perfected, then the flow of love, the flow of power from higher sources is not possible. So, I mean, that's a good statement. It's good to know, it's good to hear, but then always, if these teachings are real, they should be things that excite questions. I don't think it's good enough to hear it spoken, no matter who speaks it, and to just accept based on the fact that people say this person is wise. For me, I very much like the way the Buddha approached it, when he said that, don't accept anything that anyone tells you. He said, even if it's me, the Buddha, unless it's something that agrees with your reason and with your common sense. Don't accept it. So for me, that's a very good motto. So someone tells me that unless there is perfect trust, there cannot be the perfect flow of love and of power, even though that's coming from Krishnamurti. I have to ask, what does that mean? You say trust. Trust in what? Trust in who? Help me out here, Krishnamurti. And in that small book, he does that exact thing, because he follows that by saying two things: that you must trust the master, and the second thing, you must trust yourself. And for me, the questions don't stop there. You know, trust your master, trust yourself. I think for many people, those are two things that bring up some complications. You know, recently I was speaking, the Theosophical Society, its teachings and its history are very firmly rooted in this idea of the masters of the wisdom. This idea that just as there are highly evolved human beings, there are those great beings who have passed through this human experience and have evolved to a higher level. And we speak of them as the masters of the wisdom. But the masters of the wisdom in the history of the Theosophical Society as people, which is to say, as people that you can look at and talk to, have been encountered by very few people historically. A very small number of people have had conversations, have had meetings with these elevated beings. There was a small book done years ago that tried to track the number of people who had had that experience. The number was something like 26 people. Later studies expanded that number to 51 people, but still, when you think in terms of all of us, those people to whom the Theosophical Society and its teachings are meaningful and are real, well, probably not many of us are in that 51. That number of people that have had that encounter. So, what does that mean? There's a passage that says, if you have seen the master, you will trust him to the uttermost through many lives and through many deaths. And I always like to come back to the history. The founder of the Theosophical Society was a woman we all know, Helena Blavatsky. She had had visions. She was a very clairvoyant woman in her youth, throughout her life, but she had had visions of her master, and her master had been with her, and there was various incidents where she felt his presence, his protection. But she had seen him without ever meeting him in the flesh. There was a delegation when she was 20 years old. She was a Russian by birth, and she found herself in London. And in the city of London, on this particular day, a delegation of Indian princes were passing through the streets on their way to his destination. She happened to be there along with some hundreds of other people. Among that delegation, she saw the man that she had seen in visions, that she had felt around her throughout her life. She saw him. Later, she was able to meet with him again in the flesh for the first time. But she saw the master. So if you have seen the master, you will trust him to the uttermost. But to my mind, just like she saw him, there were a couple of hundred people in the streets watching the same delegation pass by. They saw him too. But did they? You know, what does it mean to see? This seeing that has to be something more than visual. It's more than just one of the physical senses. That upon seeing the master, upon actually being able to comprehend and interact with the consciousness, which is the master, then there is this trust. And only then. So, Krishnamurti, trust in the master and then trust in yourself. That one is probably tougher for most people than saying trust in someone you haven't seen. Because everybody believes that they know themselves. And, you know, if you ask the normal person, you know, who are you? In a normal situation, they start to tell you about their work, what they do, you know, their family, their interests, their hobbies, you know, all of these things relate to the personality. You know, this thing that comes into being with birth and disappears with death. The personality, the body, the emotions, the thoughts that we engage in throughout this little time that we have here on earth. They will point to that. But, you know, is that who we are? The ageless wisdom tradition would say something slightly different, not even slightly different, something dramatically different. It's the idea that at birth, as the body forms, as the personality is forming, there is a soul that enters into this world with this body and with this forming personality, a soul that is of a spiritual nature. In the theosophical approach to the planes of being, it's described in more depth, but I think we can work with this idea that there is a spiritual center which accompanies us through this life. It's often referred to in many ways. In the Christian tradition, there is this way of putting it, that it is the still small voice that is always speaking within us. That within each and every one of us, there is this higher voice that speaks to us continually. But it's a still small voice. And the problem for the communication is that we have a lot of much louder voices continually shouting in our minds. You know, why can't I have a bigger paycheck so that I can get the house, the car, the things my family need? There are voices of need, voices of want, shouting in our ears continuously. So much so that this still voice, which is continually uttering words of guidance, of inspiration, speaking to us about the nature of our being, which is unseparated, undivided, we just can't hear it. We miss it. But I think it's probably the experience that for everybody during a lifetime, there are moments when that voice breaks through. Everybody has been touched by this deepest aspect of their own being. Sometimes it can be very fleeting. Often I give the example of here's a picture. You're up in the morning before anybody else in the house. And you find yourself looking out the window or looking out toward the horizon, and you're watching the sun come. And for some people, they have the experience of becoming so focused on the beauty, the power, the presence of this moment that all else drops away. And in that moment, there's no thought about the job. There's no thought about the next meal. There's no thought about the laundry. All of that drops away for a moment. And then, of course, the moment passes, as all moments do. And after it passes, then we become aware, don't know what it was that happened, but for a moment, I felt at peace. For a moment, I wasn't troubled with the next desire, I was content. For a moment, this occurred. In that moment, the key to the appearance of that moment is that for that moment, everything we think of as ourselves has dropped away. For some people, it occurs in crises. For some people, watching a child at play, they can become so lost that all thoughts about me cease. And then this still small voice of the soul utters itself. In this approach to the ageless wisdom, that the theosophical approach, there is the idea that these experiences don't have to be random. They can be, they will be, if we choose not to do anything to try to further it, but that we can, in fact, connect more deeply with this essential aspect of our being. So the encouragement is made that we do those things that elevate the center of our mind. So oftentimes our mind is just locked into the problems of the day. That's normal and that's required, quite honestly. The fact that we're living in a body means the body has to be maintained. It means that our network of relationships have to be supported. So that's a fact. But it's also possible that this mind that we have can also be turned upward. That we can, by our study, we can elevate the level of our thought so that the center that is normal for us isn't just tied, bound to the things that we do. We can do that. And in that process, it moves ever closer to this soul influence. We can experiment with quiet. Everybody likes to use the word meditation. I find myself trying to use that word when it's appropriate. But I really, most of the time when we're sitting with our legs crossed, eyes closed, focusing on the breath, we're not meditating. We're practicing meditation. Just like the person playing scales on the piano isn't playing the piano, he's not playing music yet. But we practice, and that practice involves trying to first become quiet, and having done that sort of concentration exercise, then we start to find that if we persist, that there are deepening dimensions of this thing we call quiet. In the yoga tradition, they talk about dharana, dhyana, samadhi. I would describe it as quiet, stillness, and silence. But this this level of practice over time makes our connection to this soul. Theosophical parlance, we'd say Atma Buddhi Manas, but soul, I think we understand. It makes this connection and the capacity to listen, the capacity to hear, much more common, much more normal for us. And it's at this point, when he says, no, you must trust in the master and you must trust in yourself. That's the self that deserves trust. Because as we all know too well, our normal personality, we have a way of stumbling our way through life day to day, making our share of mistakes. But this other dimension, we do in fact have the capacity to link ourselves ever more deeply with that. There's this expression, it's popular in the West. It's kind of a witty expression. For most people, it's witty, but I think it's also deeply true that I am not a human being having a spiritual experience. I am a spiritual being having a human experience. It's a catchy phrase, but it's one that is true when, in fact, we find ourselves connected with this spiritual dimension of our being. And then we start to feel a little bit at home there. And so this is the type of, this generates a trust. In part, one of the ways that we are told that we can actually continue to work and to develop these things is part of what has been said is that we can take our thought, if we are thinking about some course of action and we're not sure. It has been said you take your thought and you lay it next to the thought of the master. Again, it's a catchy phrase. It's an image we can grasp. But the idea being that whatever is the pinnacle that we can reach internally, we go to that point, and then we try to lay it as an offering. There's this idea when we think about the teachings and the stories that come out of all spiritual traditions. Very often, I have said it, and I say it with the highest level of respect and the highest level of gratitude for these teachings. When you look at it, virtually every scripture that you have in the world are stories. The life of Krishna, the Mahabharata, the Gita, the Bible, all of these different books tell stories about divine personages or even about wars that have taken place. And I have often thought, having a daughter when she was young, one of the things you shared was stories. You take a child and you tell them stories that can fuel their imagination, stories that they can think about and that they can think their way into. I have often thought that the great masters who have come to this world with a mission to try to communicate something about the spiritual life to us, really trying to communicate a message that is beyond our grasp to the children or the childish humanity that we are. I mean, think about it. A master comes into this world If he were to come into the world today, he would look around and he would see what it is that we're doing to each other. You know, anyone who picks up the newspaper, you pick your country, you pick your place, there's some sort of war going on where souls who have inhabited one body, those bodies are destroying the bodies that other souls have inhabited in this thing that we have invented we call war. You look around the planet, and in every country, there are inequalities. And not just in wealth, but inequalities in terms of the capacity to sustain a life. Mahatma Gandhi, he said, to the hungry man, a piece of bread is the face of God. To someone who is in that level of need, this idea of the soul, all of these other things fly out the window, and we perpetuate that. Nobody's doing it but us. And nowadays, I used to feel very sorry. You know, I would talk to my wife. I'd say, you know, this climate change and this way that we have mistreated the planet, it's terrible what our daughter is going to inherit and have to deal with. And that used to be my thought. You know, it's a terrible thing because my daughter will have to suffer. Of course, as these scientific models have progressed, we become aware. I became aware it's not just my daughter who's going to have to face this. Now I have some skin in this game too. It's me. It's all of us. And it's the situation that we have created. So here you have a Buddha, a Jesus, a Krishna, coming to try to give a message to people who are sufficiently blind that they can't even see what they're doing. How do you tell that story? How do you give that message? And so they give it like we give it to our children, as stories. As stories which force you in your imagination to imagine and to climb this ladder ever higher that they lead us upon. And these great masters lead us to the point, you know, every ladder has a last rung, and you can't go up that ladder anymore. They lead us with these stories to the point where the remaining step is what's described as having to step out on faith. There's no rung to the ladder. They've led us this far. Now you step out. Or do you? And this is the way they try to teach. But again, everything related to this normal living, everything related to the spiritual life, especially, requires this cultivation of a trust in that which is worthy of trust. And to the extent that we find ourselves capable to do that, there is this something that becomes our experience in life, where our very thoughts become active powers in the world, where the words that we say, we talk about latent powers within this theosophical society, how there are powers within us. Many people think in terms of clairvoyance, ability to see the future, to see auras. Those are available, those are here, of course. But the powerful things, the highest level of power and the meaning of spirituality is oneness. To the extent that we can move beyond the sense that we're separated from one another, to the extent that even our thoughts can heal one another, that our smile can uplift, that our words have power. We can come to that point. And that comes through a trust. And it becomes such a factor in our lives, it can become that really there was an expression that was said by a fellow in the United States many, many years ago, shortly before the founding of the Theosophical Society, a man named Ralph Waldo Emerson. He made the comment that who you are speaks so loudly that I can't hear a word you're saying. Presence. The presence that we carry based on this trust. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for inviting me back. Thanks to the Utkal Federation for being willing to have me here again. And thank you all for taking the time and giving your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. And while you are formulating your questions, may I request Madam Lily Boyd to speak a few words to our members.
Thank you for inviting me here today. And it's very nice to meet all of you. And thank you, Deepa, and thank you to everyone. And I have enjoyed myself going on the first day to the colleges and everything. It was very nice and learning about this place. And I hope everyone will did enjoy the speech, what our president gave today. And thank you again for inviting me up here. I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, Madam, for having graced this place. Now the time for the questions and answers will be by him. So who is going to ask the first question?
The question is, trust in God, that is the sixth tenet that we have been learning about religions. One is trust in God. And then the third part, you know, to our last scenario. The sixth tenet was to religion. As we trust in God, we have found that most of us is at the subside trust, and we don't say that trust not future in the second. And then we also have said there was point in the trust. I want to learn that trust may act in the living present part. But how long will this trust continue? The present scenario when the world is now within around money. So we all know whatever we say, for everything, money is given, whether it has, where it is. So how long can we trust God or trust Him? Right.
I think it was Muhammad was asked a similar question. What he said was trust in God but also tie up your camel. Trust in God, but don't leave your camel to be taken. Tie him to the post. Trust in God, but take action according to the highest vision that you have. So, yes, the idea that there is a spiritual entity, however you describe it, is valuable. But I think we also leave out very often the part that that's not something separate from us. There's not me and then some divine. The divine encompasses all. So we act in those ways that at whatever the highest level we can see at the moment is true to that divinity. So, basically, even now you can just say, I act in a way where I try to do the least harm to myself and others. So is participation in, the sorts of consumption and pollution that come with it, is that something that I can diminish? God did not create that. And God's not going to undo it either, except through his hands and his feet, us. And so I think that's a more helpful way to frame this. The moment we start thinking of the divine as something exterior and removed, that's what has permitted the sorts of behaviors that we have adopted as a human family. First, and then we'll bring the microphone to you. She'll ask her question and you can go next. Thank you. I can repeat the question if they don't hear. Yeah. Okay. So the question is, what is it that I would interpret it as? What is it that started me on this? What is it that put me here? I can say that I did not have the good fortune of having a family that was associated with this kind of ageless wisdom studies. Here in India, I meet many people who tell me that they're third generation, fourth generation. There are even some fifth. I've met one person who is a sixth generation theosophist. And I think they're telling the truth. But I didn't have that. That was not my background. I came from a family of people of high ideals, but this whole spiritualism and occultism wasn't part of it. And I wasn't in that direction either, at least not knowing. I did have the experience when I was early years in university of meeting someone who was extremely dynamic, extremely charismatic, and also one of these people who's quite clairvoyant as well. I met this person while I was on a break from college. He was older than my cousin introduced me to him. And there were a lot of young people who had gathered around him. I didn't want to, I had other things to do. I was busy doing Tim, which was some version of Lost. But anyway, I did meet him, and then through 2 conversations, it was something that stimulated. I left, went back to think about some of the things he said, and one of these types of experiences that I described of, you know, something suddenly dropping away and something that was behind this shell appearing very vividly. The problem with actually seeing something that's real is that you no longer have the option of unseeing it. You're stuck with reality. So that was my problem. That was what started me. Because he was very much involved with the Theosophical Society, that was the avenue that I was introduced to. And it was one, if I can be honest, the Theosophical teachings are the most comprehensive that I know of. If they weren't, I wouldn't be here. Because if today I were to find something that could exceed the scope, the breadth, the context, the completeness of this whole theosophical teaching, I would walk off this stage now and pursue that in the interest of being true to myself, but I haven't found that. And so that's what put me here. And until you all say go, I guess this is where I'll be for a while.
I want to say something. Our father joined the Theosophical Society. So he was our father joined the Theosophical Society first, so he was a first generation. Then, just like in your case, our grandfather joined later. So our father became a second generation theologian. And she has joined this month. She's the third generation theologian.
One of the ones I was talking about. You know, honestly, I used to feel sometimes I'd be around all these fourth and fifth and sixth generation theosophists, and I'd feel a little inadequate. So on one occasion, it was actually the truth. I said, well, I'm second generation, which in kind of a convoluted way, it's true, because I joined the Theosophical Society. And the next year was its 100th anniversary celebrated in New York, which is where I came from. My mother and father particularly were wondering what it is that their son had gotten into. You know, they didn't know anything about it. So my mother, in order to attend some of these meetings of the 100th anniversary, she joined the Theosophical Society. So that's how I say I'm a second generation. I'm sort of a backward second generation theosophist. The gentleman back there had a question.
Already, from the recent time, have brought them on the system of the family. I was actually already to ask you a question when I was using your topic for the generation. The non-religion, the religion, then what is the culture of because when I was acting a war, the European countries are also developing the non-religion community. So what would you like to say on this?
All right, so as I understand the question, is non-religion also a religion? I know you have this large, probably the majority of people in European countries identify as spiritual, but not religious. That's one category. But non-religion, I mean, it is possible. I mean, I have known people who have been atheists who pursue their atheism with religious intensity. So, I mean, that's possible. A religious approach really means a serious approach, you know, not just a frivolous approach. Something that is serious, something that is focused, something that is determined to relate to what is true. So if you feel that religion is not true, well, pursue that as far as you can go with it. Like, that's the best I could do, I think, for answering. So,
My name is Malay Mishra. I am a retired ambassador of the government. So, in countries for civil health career. I would say I'm not a formal member of the Philosophical Society, but it has attracted me for a lot of things. I got kind of served by here. I came here to solve sometime back and I came to know more and then I got some literature I am studying some. I am a master myself. I'm a part of the Shivananda group of society. My guru was also a great master, Swami Adyar, who is a big initiation. You know, the main problem in today's society is that the material has triumphed over the spiritual. You say trust. We have a tremendous trust deficit in this society, as you would have well noted during your lectures and your visits all over the place. Spiritual life takes you some distance, but doesn't give you a full solution to how to address the societal chaos. The problem is not individual, the problem is society. We need the younger generation to have role models for us. Where are they? Where are the masters in today's society? Who does a young fellow follow? An aspirational youth of this country, of this state, for example, who does he follow? Where does he go? This kind of guidance is what is missing. So how do you address this? How do you address the collective, spiritualizing the collective instead of the individual? The individual can be spiritualized, but how do you spiritualize the collective? And that is the need of the hour, I think. Your comment.
I would both agree and disagree. Some sort of collective growing awareness is going to be required to address the problems that have been created by collective unawareness and wrong thinking. To say that it is not the issue for the individual is where we might part company. In the sense that, what is it that composes a collective? Collective does not exist in and of itself. It is composed of numerous, countless individuals, each one behaving in a certain way. When it becomes a collective, that's an expression of the overall character of its individual members. So there is no possibility for collective enlightenment without the similar effect beginning with individuals. Sometimes I have a friend who uses the example of a volcano. Everybody knows what a volcano is. It's this cone on the earth where something erupts, but that's really not what the volcano is, because from many directions underneath the earth, unseen, there are these flows of lava that come. And at a certain point, it builds to the point that the only way that it can be expressed is in explosion. Similarly, when you look at the trends of human thought and the ways in which we contribute to those, yes, it's a collective endeavor. And, maybe my non-participation in the speeches of anger, for instance, that are in the United States, it's time for an election. And it has become clear to some minds that the more negative you become in terms of your advertising, the more people you attract. That's the supposed wisdom. But the fact that this negativity is being propagated does not require my participation. I don't have to add to that stream. In fact, I can refuse to participate. That's an activity that I do. Maybe it rubs off on my daughter, maybe my friend. So you diminish the force of that stream. In Chicago, where I live part of the year, one of the greatest engineering wonders took place where they reversed the direction of a river. The river was carrying pollution into the lake where we got all of our drinking water from. And so by digging small channels, taking the water that was flowing in one direction, they were able to completely reverse the flow. It took time, but it did happen. And so I think the participation of the individual, no one has the ability to check out of this process of developing a collective awareness. It's not here. For some who are more optimistic, we feel it's coming. Part of what it is that I do, I travel places a lot. And when I get to a certain place, I'm in that place, and the point of my being there is to sit down and share thoughts and share a moment and share a presence with others. And what I find is this, that around the world, there is a network of people whose ideas are turned toward right behavior. And it's already in existence. But if you believe that when you pick up the newspaper tomorrow, this meeting is going to be in it, it's not. But there are however many people, 60, 70, 80 people, whose minds are turned in a different direction and who have committed themselves to trying to turn ever more deeply in that direction. It's not to say that we're going to avoid, I mean, the law of karma is real. And so certain things, you build it up to a certain point, and then it gets to the point that there are consequences, you could say. At a certain point, it becomes unavoidable. We're trying to dodge that. But all of these things also function in cycles. And that's also part of this, this idea. The individual has to do what they can. The individual has to be able to form with groups of others. Those groups of others have to be able to network. And then as that develops, then that's the whole world. Perhaps a distant one. Thank you again.
We'll have Ashu, those summarizing in Odia, 5 minutes.
ମୁଁ ଭାବୁଥିଲି କି କିଛି କହିବାକୁ ପଡିବ ବୋଲି କିନ୍ତୁ ଯୋଉଭଳି ହ୍ୟାଲୋ ମତେ ଶେଷ ମୁହୂର୍ତ୍ତରେ କୁହାଗଲା କିଛି କହିବା ପାଇଁ ଓଡିଆରେ ଯୋଉମାନେ ଭଲ ଭାବରେ ବୁଝିନଥିବେ କିନ୍ତୁ ଯୋଉମାନେ ବୁଝିଛନ୍ତି ତାକୁ ଭାରି ଅବାଗିଆ ଲାଗିପାରେ ହଁ